Hey y'all, Scott here, and I love Super Smash Bros. So much I could scream. The fighting mechanics, the cast of characters, the collectibles, the clone characters, the online, big battlefield, this fucking menu, Smash Tour, Fire Emblem. Super Smash Bros., the most prolific crossover series on the planet, allowing you to pit Nintendo and gaming icons against each other. Mario vs. Link, Samus vs. Kirby, Brown vs. Board of Education, the fighting game series has blossomed into not just a game, but an event. Every time a new Smash Bros. Is announced, people go wild. Speculation runs rampant as to what new characters will be included, what stages will we fight on, what modes will be available. When a new character is revealed as a playable fighter, there's simply no game that can live up to that amount of excitement. It's so much more than being able to play as that character in Super Smash Bros. And pit them against other gaming legends. It basically solidifies that character's place in gaming history. That's the power of Super Smash Bros. Nowadays, we not only have dozens upon dozens of Nintendo characters and stages, but third-party ones as well. Online play, one of the biggest competitive scenes for any game out there, merchandise, and Street Smash. However, the Super Smash Bros. Series started all the way back in 1999 with a game oddly enough entitled Super Smash Bros. Created by Masahiro Sakurai, the creator of everybody's favorite pink tumor-based platformer Kirby. It's immediately pretty obvious if you're a fan of both series that a lot of Kirby's design philosophy went into Smash Bros. Not only do both series have a few similarities in terms of controls and gameplay, but Kirby was always meant to be a game for everybody, easy and simple enough for newcomers to pick up and play, but with enough depth, charm, and fun to keep even the most seasoned of video game players around. Smash Bros. Is the same, but for fighting games. It's a fighting game that anybody can play without having to learn various button combinations or anything like other fighting games at the time. Games like Street Fighter required some specific button inputs to perform key moves, and thus would encourage newcomers to just mindlessly button mash. Smash Bros. Was much simpler to understand. You have two attack buttons, a standard attack and a special attack, and you can combine those with directions on the analog stick for different moves. You can jump, shield, grab, and that's fundamentally all you need to know. That makes it easy for many to understand, but if you truly want to get good, you're going to have to think about when and where to pull off a specific move, whether you're in the air or not, whether a special attack or standard attack would be more effective. Super Smash Bros. Thankfully doesn't sacrifice depth for simplicity, and it's safe to say that Sakurai succeeded in terms of a simple to learn, hard to master fighting game. It was originally pitched as Dragon King the fighting game, with some mannequins as the characters. Sakurai wanted the game to have instantly recognizable and likable characters, thus he wanted to include the wide array of Nintendo All-Stars. His colleague who coded the prototype, Satoru Iwata, buttered up Shigeru Miyamoto on the concept of using characters like Mario in the game, in which he was initially hesitant on the idea. Regardless of getting permission first, Sakurai threw together another prototype of the game featuring Mario, Donkey Kong, Samus, and Fox fighting, showed it to the Nintendo higher-ups, and the game we know of today was officially greenlit. The game was released in early 1999 in Japan and the rest of the world throughout the year, so now let's get into the full game itself. Super Smash Bros. Kicks things off with an intro that tells you everything you need to know. Some kid who's a disembodied hand is playing with his Nintendo dolls, which range from, alright, yeah, a Mario toy, to, how the fuck did you get a Captain Falcon doll? The concept of the characters in Super Smash Bros. Being toys has been carried on throughout the series' life, but it's not shoved in your face. It's a fact that makes everybody go, oh yeah, that's right, rather than being the focal point of it all. To me, it always felt like a workaround for a grown man to beat the piss out of some yellow rat without the ESRB shaking their fist furiously at the game. This is the only Smash Bros. In which they're dolls though. Future games feature the characters as trophies instead. We then go into this crazy minute-long slap in the face to anybody that ever doubted the concept of Smash Bros. I always liked the section of the opening with Mario and Kirby at a standoff, a moment in which every Nintendo fan said, oh shit. The characters clash together, we're given a preview of 4 unlockable characters, and then, now that's what I like to call an ambiguous logo. A logo that's been the main emblem of the Smash Bros. Series since this very moment. It's synonymous with Smash Bros. At this point, but what does it mean? According to Sakurai himself, the cross symbolizes the crossover of characters, with the 4 sections representing the 4-player multiplayer. Or at least that's what this napkin I found at Arby's tells me. After the logo appears, we're greeted to a hearty and with that, a legend was born. The gameplay of Smash Bros. Is different from other fighting games, but incredibly easy to comprehend. You and up to 3 other players are on a stage, get knocked off the stage, you lose a stock. The more damage you take, the easier it is to get knocked off. The last fighter standing, or the one with the most knockouts within the time limit, reigns supreme. Elements of the stages can interfere with the fight. Items randomly scatter across the battlefield. If you choose to not turn them off completely, it becomes effing nuts. Before we blast into a match, we're graded to a character selection. 8 fighters playable from the get-go, 4 more pummeling in after playing the single-player modes under certain conditions. Starting roster screams Nintendo, there's no debating that. Everybody has purpose here, and nobody feels like an odd inclusion. But then when we take into consideration the 4 unlockable ones, whoa. I mean, Luigi, yeah, he makes sense to be in a Smash game. Jigglypuff, a Pokemon with popularity, but in terms of being included in the first Smash Bros. Game, who's considered to be a big enough Nintendo character to be represented as 1/12 of them? And then we have Captain Falcon and Ness. Who the fuck? Captain Falcon and Ness are much more obscure than the other characters, but hey, they were still a part of series that were considered Nintendo staples. Sure, Captain Falcon was like the least recognizable part of F-Zero at the time, and Ness was from a cult classic RPG, but still, you gotta have the more obscure characters in your fighting game. The unlockables seem to be included due to ease of programming, like Luigi's just a straight up clone of Mario, Jigglypuff repurposed Kirby's model, Captain Falcon seems to be repurposing the original models from the Dragon King prototype, and Ness is a mystery. He didn't seem easier to program compared to the other characters. Whatever, I'm happy he's here. And overall, the roster of Smash Bros. 64 has the lowest percentage of Scott's not happy with the Smash Bros. Roster of the entire series. There's really no filler, no oversaturation of any series, everything makes sense and blends together perfectly here. So I like the roster, but how do the characters play? The Smash Bros. Series nowadays has always impressed me with how creatively they turn a character into a fighter, throwing in as many references and callbacks to their series origins as possible. A character in Smash truly feels like you're playing that character. Smash 64, not as much. You have a fair amount with moves that correlate with their games and what they've done in the past, and then you have your typical everyday Donkey Kong where it feels like the developer said, oh shit, he has arms, we can make a moveset based around that. Not as much fan service as other games. Loads of moves that were just made up for Smash Bros. And have no origin based on the character's games. It's why by the time we get to Smash Bros. For 3DS and Wii U, you can definitely tell who's been in the series the longest. While the new characters have incredibly creative and unique playstyles, Donkey Kong has some punch thing. If you go down to the data section and click on characters, we can see quick little bios on everybody, plus see what games they hailed from, which is a precursor to the trophy system in future games. I have to say, I always felt like the works section picked some random honkin' games for each character. Like it says Mario is from Super Mario Bros., alright, that makes sense. Super Mario Kart, alright, again a solid inclusion. And Mario Kart 64. Why 2 Mario Kart games? Wouldn't it have made more sense to include Mario 3, World 64? I'm getting angsty just thinking about it. Also, Pikachu has a vastly different bio compared to the other characters, an excerpt from the Pokédex. That would be fine, but the other Pokemon in the game, Jigglypuff, has an actual bio. It feels like they almost forgot Pikachu and quickly slammed this in there. Alright, enough of the dawdle sesh. Let's get into a match and oh god, this feels wacky. Not bad, it's just, in my opinion, doesn't feel as good and definitely a bit off compared to the other games in the franchise. Whenever I'm off the stage, man, I start fidgeting in my seat like it's so unnerving. Always feels like it's up in the air whether I'm gonna die or not. Also, look at this. Those are definitely polygons, there's no doubt about that. It's obviously the very first in the series, but it's still Smash Bros. The multiplayer monsoon we know of today, and you can still garner quite a bit of fun out of this sucker. Items randomly appear on the battlefield, and these can be loads of fun. There's not a ton in the game, but we have Pokeballs, Bob-ombs, the hammer from Donkey Kong, and the iconic home run bat. If you're a total prude, you can turn off the items, which I prefer doing in the Smash games I'm actually somewhat competent at, but for Smash 64, crank those bad boys up, man. I fucking blow at this game. I crave a good Maxim Tomato from time to time. Of course, none of this matters if the stages are lame-o, and thankfully Smash 64 has nothing but decent to great stages. None of them are annoying to play on for me, none of them have bad layouts. They all have good, fun designs with a few stage hazards here and there that you can totally avoid if you know what you're doing. Since there's only 9, might as well go through them all. Peach's Castle, not one of my favorites. I always found the design of this one to be really odd. So we're above Peach's Castle and we're battling on top of a mishmash of geometry. I guess canonically, since the characters are toys, the stages are built out of random objects from the child's room. The intro shows us off, I guess. I don't know, I don't want to dive too deep into this. Congo Jungle, a fun one. Don't have much to add here. Hyrule Castle, definitely preferred to the Peaches variety. I actually really like this stage. It has loads of fun areas to duke it out in. I just think the layout looks really odd. It looks super rudimentary, even for the Nintendo 64. Planet Zebes, it's alright. The acid comes up and spells disaster to those who can't grasp the concept of jumping. Yoshi's Island, really simple but enjoyable. Dreamland, another incredibly simple one. Wispy Woods here blows either left or right from time time to time, but it rarely affects the fight. Sector Z, a really fun stage. I love that you can traverse the entirety of the Great Fox. Another ship comes down and blasts the piss out of you sometime though. What unfortunate. Saffron City, what a stage. You can easily just fight on the standard platforms if you don't want any stage interferences, or you can hop over to this little doorway and these nightmares rain on the parade. You can also unlock the Mushroom Kingdom stage based off of the original Super Mario Bros. A lot of really solid stages here. Now I've talked as much about the multiplayer of this game as I possibly could have, which you can play alongside computer-controlled opponents if that lifestyle interests you, but what if you want to play Smash Brothers by yourself? Well, let's mosey on over to the single player department. As you can see here, we have a wide variety of mode. There's one single player mode here, and it's what the series would later call Classic Mode. A series of fights and mini games testing your strength. The problem with this mode is that the fights are the exact same every time. The first fight is with Link. You fight a giant Donkey Kong, a team of Kirbys, the Mario Brothers, a target test, board the platforms, race to the finish. It never changes. Even after unlocking characters, it doesn't change things up. Future games bring in randomization, keeping this mode much fresher each playthrough. The target test and board the platforms minigames are different for each character, which that deserves a solid neat. The final few bouts are against Metal Mario, which blows, the Fighting Polygon team, which are mysterious figures we don't know the origin of, / that's fucking Yoshi, dude. They're just messed up models of all the characters in the game. And then, Master Hand, the one behind all of this, the main boss of the series, and then after defeat, we get this little ditty. Thanks, that truly makes me feel triumphant. Go, credits go, and repeat. Speaking of the music, it's alright. You get a lot of iconic tracks, but with that Nintendo 64-tastic sound. I gotta be honest, there's not much else I can say about this one. It's more so interesting to look back on rather than play nowadays. That's not to say it's a bad game, far from it. It's just that we have far better and more accessible Smash Bros. Games to play nowadays, and with every entry in the series expanding upon the concept of the first game and being a better version of this game, there's not much reason to go back to Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64, outside of seeing where it all began or simply to waste an afternoon. After a few hours, you've basically seen everything this one has to offer. In the end, I have so much respect for this entry, and the multiplayer is still fun to this day. Single player wise, it doesn't have too much going on, but so did other fighting games at the time. It's passable. Play it to see where it all started, but you're better off playing the games that came after it. They just all improved upon the foundation and offered more refined gameplay. But they didn't have this amazing commercial. Look at this thing. Magnificent. So to answer the question on everybody's mind, are you wrong for preferring Smash 64 to every game after it? Yeah. Hey y'all, Scott here. Listen, I've come up with the perfect scheme to nab myself a copy of Super Smash Bros. Melee. All I have to do is waddle around, knock on as many college guys' dorms as I can, hollering, "Did somebody order a pizza?" Little do they know, the only pizza I have is a hankering to steal a copy of Super Smash Bros. Melee. Hopefully I can at least nab one copy. I don't know what happened, I just kind of blacked out and here I am. Super Smash Bros., the series all about fighting as your favorite characters from a multitude of different video game franchises, mostly from Nintendo. Out of the handful of games released in the series, I think it's pretty easy to see which is the most popular to this day. And spoiler alert, let's just get this one out of the way. I am just no good at this game. Oh god. And with that being said, Super Smash Brothers Melee, the one everybody wants to put up right on the fridge. I think the best way to describe the first Smash Brothers on Nintendo 64 was there was nowhere to go but up. It was a great game, but the concept of Smash Brothers could be so much more. More characters, more stages, more modes, more collectibles, better mechanics. Melee is when the Smash Brothers series really started to grow some hair on its chest. So much of what we love about the series today can be traced back to this game right here. The development of Super Smash Bros. Melee can be traced back to as early as May of 1999, with the series director Masahiro Sakurai telling others that there will be a Smash Bros. Game on the GameCube. By July of that year, he worked out a development plan in private, even without a GameCube development kit, as they didn't exist yet. The game's development took 13 months at HAL Laboratory, and Sakurai described his lifestyle as destructive during this time period, taking barely any time to rest. 13 months is an insanely quick development time, especially when you compare how drastic of an improvement Melee is to the first game. The game was officially fully unveiled to the public at E3 2001, showcasing the game's intro movie and later the initial roster of playable characters. Melee later released in late 2001 in both Japan and North America, with Europe getting the game in spring of 2002. Oh man, this box art. In my opinion, this is one of the least interesting boxes the series has had. ever. I think it does a better job conveying what the game is all about compared to the Nintendo 64 one. I mean, come on, most of the characters are facing the other way or covered up by the 64's box layout, but this just looks like a screenshot from the game, nothing special. The Japanese box, in comparison, way cooler. Also, anybody else find it weird that Melee was rated T for teen? I know Brawl was too, but it's just weird seeing a game with Mario, Kirby, and Pikachu in it that's recommended for ages 13 and up. Man, look at all the features this thing touts on the back. The characters, stages, secrets, trophies, epilepsy. This game has it all. First impressions are always key, and Super Smash Bros. Melee hits it out of the park. It all starts off with an intro that defines what an intro should be. This is something that should accompany every instance of childbirth. It just sets everything up to be an absolute jaw-dropper of an experience, ending things off with a Super Smash Brothers Melee! First things first, we gotta talk about the characters. The roster this time around has been more than doubled compared to the 12 in the first game. Melee offers a solid 26 characters, with everybody from the original returning. The newcomers in this game are mainly here filling out representation of Nintendo's biggest series. We get new Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon characters with a few others thrown in there. Peach, Bowser, and Dr. Mario join the series alongside Ganondorf, Young Link, and Zelda, who can transform into her alter ego Sheik, who has a completely different moveset, and Mewtwo and Pichu are thrown in there as well. Falco comes in from Star Fox, Marth and Roy make their Smash Bros. Debut hailing from the Fire Emblem series, which was Japan only at the time of Melee's release, and two retro throwback characters, the Ice Climbers and Mr. Game & Watch. There is so much to love about the new characters introduced in Melee. I mean, Ice Climbers are such a unique and obscure pick. The inclusion of Fire Emblem characters helped yank the series out of Japan. Mr. Game & Watch, get out of here! However, we have to bring this up. 6 of the 14 new characters we got are clones of other characters. Dr. Mario was a clone of Mario, Young Link, Pichu, Pikachu, Falco, Fox, Roy, Marth, and Ganondorf, Captain Falcon, which is just mind-boggling. Even though the clone characters' movesets are primarily the exact same as the character they're based on, I gotta be honest, they did a good job tweaking their properties to make the characters distinct enough for you to prefer a clone over the original and vice versa, like I prefer Dr. Mario to plain old Mario, for example. Sakurai added so many clones to Melee to appease fans who wanted certain characters in the game, as they were under time constraints and clones didn't take too much development time. To that I say, who the hell played the first Smash Bros. Game and said, God, I wish Dr. Mario was in this game? I'd say the roster additions were nice, but a bit disappointing. We only got 8 brand new characters, the majority of which hailed from Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon. Not a ton of variety, but all is forgiven when we see the sheer amount of what else Melee brought to the table. The stage selection has been amped up to the highest degree. 29 stages, with only 3 being brought back from the first one. The hazards in these stages are way more prevalent than they were in the Smash 64 stages, but come on, Onett, Pokemon Stadium, Temple, Green Greens, Great Bay, just to name a few. Absolute classics. The stage layouts across the board are way crazier now, which can be seen as either a positive or a negative. Some of these can be pretty annoying, but it's still all in great fun. Just like the items, the number of which have increased. The gameplay from Smash 64 has basically been brought over, but cranked up like crazy. Not only do characters all have additional moves to pull off, the most prominent of which being a 4th special attack, the side special, but the speed of the game has been dramatically increased. Everything just feels snappier and more solid than Smash 64. The gameplay definitely reigns supreme, but everything surrounding it has been perfected. Melee feels like it was made to be played for years, with the player discovering and unlocking things after all that time. Have you ever tried to unlock everything in Melee? Like, Jesus, Mewtwo requires a solid 20 hours of versus matches played or 700 separate matches played, and he's not even the last character you unlock. Melee makes unlocking things feel unbelievably rewarding. It's like an event. You find these things, you don't just play through the adventure mode and bada boom, all characters unlocked. No. Melee surprises you with a new challenger approaching, always shrouded in a silhouette like, holy shit. Who could this be? I won't lie, it can be a pain if you want everything unlocked, but there's a certain magic to unlocking things in Melee that the Smash Bros. Series has yet to replicate. Graphically, the game just blew everybody away when it came out. Nowadays, I think the only main problem with the graphics is that they're using character designs from the N64 era, so it looks a bit outdated in that aspect. Regardless, I think the game still looks great. Models are all buttery smooth, and it's just the biggest step up from Smash 64. Also, the music has been ramped up like crazy. Orchestra pieces, remixes aplenty, so much crammed into this one. But Melee introduces one of my favorite things in the series, the trophies. Throughout the game, you can collect random trophies or earn coins from playing that you can spend on a lottery minigame to nab some. The trophies not only span the series of playable characters in the game, but so many of Nintendo's other franchises, games exclusive to Japan, games that haven't even come out at the time. It turns into a crash course of Nintendo history, a museum. It gives incentive to play more, and it's just fun to ogle the trophies of other characters, items, or settings, read the description, see where the trophy originated from. This evolved from the character bios in Smash 64 and is one of the best things Melee introduced to the series in my opinion. Remember the first game and its cornucopia of mode? Well, here's a sequel with literally 12 lifetimes worth of content both in terms of single player and multiplayer. Let's take a quick look at the single player first off. Classic mode is the evolution of the one single player mode from the first game. You go through a series of fights with some mini games thrown in there, break the targets, race to the finish, and snag the reason to play Super Smash Bros. The major difference in classic mode now is that it's randomized. You go through a different series of fights each time with different opponents on different stages. It really does wonders to the replayability as it keeps things super fresh each playthrough. Classic mode ends things off with a final battle against Master Hand, plus his wacky Uncle Crazy Hand this time around if you played on normal difficulty or higher with no continues. But hold on there, because we have another mode in the form of adventure mode. Everybody goes on about how awesome this thing is. You traverse the Mushroom Kingdom, explore the dungeons of Zelda, escape Brinstar. It highlights one of the coolest aspects of the Smash Bros. Series, seeing a character from one franchise in the world of another. While I love the concept of adventure mode, I gotta be honest, this thing just ends up feeling like a complete missed opportunity. Like, the first few areas are legitimate worlds to go through, but then we just end up fighting 3 Nesses on the Onett stage and fight a bunch of Kirbys on the Green stage. It just kinda loses its steam as it goes on and just feels like more of classic mode. This one ends things off with a battle against Bowser. Just kidding, Melee introduces Giga Bowser appearing at the end, much like how Crazy Hand appears in classic mode, beating the mode on normal or higher with no continues. But this time you have to beat it under 18 minutes. If you don't meet the criteria to fight Giga Bowser, the end of adventure mode just feels hollow. And wait right there, because there's one more main single player mode, unlocked after all characters are unlocked. All-Star mode. This is a gauntlet where you're tasked with fighting every single character on the roster without dying. You have 3 recovery hearts that reduce your damage to 0, so you have to make the decision if this is the moment you totally wuss out and recover your damage, or just run in risking your life just to say you beat the shit out of Mr. Game & Watch. After the regular single player modes, we have event matches, which are 51 fights under fun and unique circumstances. Event 35 poses the question, are routine physicals supposed to hurt this much? And Super Smash Bros. Melee was the first time we could experience what Luigi's prostate exam was like. These things are awesome. Think of event match like a kind of mission mode. It's really fun to go through all these and try to beat them all. Except for Event 51, which is so damn hard it forces anybody to destroy the game console you're playing this game on. The stadium features some mini games like Home Run Contest, where you abuse the sandbag and give it a wind up, a hit, and blam, see how far it'll go. Target Test, which are just the target mini games in classic mode, but this time available at whim. And Multi-Man Melee, which is where a bunch of wireframe what's-their-faces appear and you just have to take care of them. There's a lot of different variants on this mode, most of which make it fairly easy to knock out the opponents, except for Cruel Melee. Do we even have to show you footage of this? That was unnecessary. That training's here too, but let's move on to all the different multiplayer modes. Versus mode entitles us to the multiplayer mayhem Smash Bros. Is known for. Up to 4 players duke it out as their favorite Nintendo characters, trying to knock each other off the screen. There's still stock and time battles, but now we see the addition of coin and bonus matches as well. Coin battles are fighting for the most coins before time runs out, and yes, the appropriate response is one person clapping in a sea of thousands. And then bonus matches. I guess they're based on the points you'd get in, say, classic mode for doing skillful things, but now it's how the game determines who wins. And that, everybody, is how you create a mode everybody kind of forgets about. Special Melee is for the wacky player inside of all of us. We have a bunch of different forms of versus matches. Stamina mode, where your health is like most fighting games. You lose when you reach 0. Giant, tiny, lightning, slow-mo, or everybody's favorite, single button mode. These modes aren't frequent visits for me personally, but they're fun to have here and to dabble in once in a while. Tournaments are available as well. There's truly so much to do here in modes for every type of player. And speaking of every type of player, what if you're the player that wants to play the game competitively? Well, Melee is for you. By accident. So many of Melee's more advanced techniques derive from oversights of the game's mechanics. For example, one of the most well-known techniques in Melee is called wave dashing. I don't know anything about how to do this, so I wrote down some tips on my hands, except they're hard to read while holding the controller. Alright, I think I'm finally ready to attempt a wave dash. Here we go. Yeah, I'd consider myself a casual hardcore fan of Smash Brothers. I love everything about the series, analyzing the characters, stages, trophies, listening to the music, playing the game in general. But I would not consider myself to be competitively viable. The Smash Brothers game I'd consider myself to be at the very least competent at would be Smash Brothers for 3DS and Wii U. But man, you say you prefer any game to Melee and people will go nuts on you. Melee is the overall best Smash Brothers to many. It's the competitive Smash of choice, was the biggest jump forward for the franchise, can still be enjoyed by casual fans. I love all the games and think Melee is one of the most triumphant entries in the series. But honestly, I prefer playing the more recent games. Gasp. Ooh, look at me, I'm Super Smash Bros. Melee. Everybody loves me and says I'm the best Smash Brothers. Everybody loves picking on Brawl. Listen, I love me some Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and if you want a reason for that, I'm a pussy! Come on, Brawl was a good game. Competitively, yeah, blew, but it was still incredibly well made and loads of fun. Don't take it the wrong way, I got into Brawl way more when it came out. I played Melee at friends' houses a few times, but didn't own it and play it a lot until a few years ago. And hey, I love this game, but the nostalgia I have with Brawl, plus its sheer amount of content and fan service, will always make it the one I prefer personally. I mean, fuck this game. So while I really like each new Smash game more than the last, I can easily say Melee is the series' crowning achievement just because this is the game that every Smash Brothers afterwards built off of. At the time, it was mind-blowing, and even nowadays, looking at all the content in it, it's still incredibly impressive. While Smash Brothers started on the Nintendo 64, I think it's fair to say the series truly started with Melee. Super Smash Bros. Melee is the cream of the crop of the franchise, no matter how you look at it, and while the game isn't my absolute favorite of the series, it's absolutely phenomenal, no doubt, and is like a dream come true. Speaking of which, I had an insane dream last night. I had a dream that I was the sex bot! Hey y'all, Scott here. You ever love a game so much that other people say is basically the bubonic plague? I've been there, and I'm here to combat those people by stripping that word of all negativity. I love Super Smash Bros. Brawl. This shit is bubonic! Alright, a Smash Bros. Crash course, if you will. 1999 sees the release of Super Smash Bros. On Nintendo 64. A fighting game like no other, which saw up to 4 players trying to knock their opponents off of the stage/screen as an array of Nintendo All-Stars. The more damage you take, the higher percentage you gain, and the easier it is for you to get launched. It was a critical and commercial hit, so the next step was some solid evidence that God exists with a 2-year development cycle. Super Smash Bros. Melee released on the GameCube only a few weeks after the system's launch in 2001 and upped the ante on everything from the previous game. A crazy amount of new single-player content, more characters, stages, better mechanics, Melee had it all and is how a sequel is done. While the GameCube was far from Nintendo's most successful platform, Melee still sold incredibly well. It was the game people bought GameCubes for, the game people knew the GameCube for. With the popularity of Melee, people were dying for a new game for years. Then E3 2005 stumbles into the room. Satoru Iwata is discussing details on the company's newly announced next-generation console, the Nintendo Revolution, and decided to announce that, yup, it's a thing.
1 or 2 Wi-Fi games will be ready for launch. And I am pushing our teams to make sure Smash Brothers is one of them.
Yes, a new Super Smash Bros. Was officially announced at E3 2005. All that was said was, hey, Smash Bros. Will be a launch title on the Revolution with online play, right guys? The Smash Bros. Director Masahiro Sakurai was surprised at the announcement, as nobody ever told him a new Smash game was in development. Iwata met with him the next day, formally asking him to be involved with this Smash Bros. Game, being in charge or as close to in charge as possible. And with that meeting in the books, the third Super Smash Bros. Game officially entered production a day after it was announced to be officially in production. After Sakurai finalized some plans like the initial character roster, development commenced later that year. Following Nintendo's E3 2006 press conference showcasing the newly renamed Nintendo Revolution, now going by Nintendo premiered the first look at the next entry in the Super Smash Bros. Series, Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I always loved the intro showing the characters transforming from Melee to Brawl and the freeze frames with the new characters' names underneath. The trailer revealed Meta Knight from Kirby, Zero Suit Samus from Metroid, Wario sporting his WarioWare attire, and Pit from Kid Icarus, everybody's favorite. Also shown off was the inclusion of Final Smashes and Assist trophies, a pretty spectacular first impression. They're really letting anybody be a Smash Brother, aren't they? Now, I wasn't there for the great Brawl wait sesh of 2005 to 2008. I wasn't actively following gaming news at the time, but I've concluded it went like... Nice. There's gonna be
stages?
Every weekday, a new piece of information was revealed about Brawl on the official website, the Smash Bros. Dojo, starting on May 22nd, 2007. These updates would range from how to use a controller to, is that a fucking Sonic the Hedgehog? Yeah, Sonic made it in, but because of it, among numerous other issues, Brawl saw a few delays after initially being pegged for a December 2007 release.
Yes, the Smash community is stoked. But when? Well, not next year. Not next spring.
Releasing on January 31st, 2008 in Japan, March 9th, 2008 in North America, and June 27th, 2008 in Europe, was the wait worth it? People fucking hate this game. Brawl is generally considered the weakest of the Smash Bros. Games to many. Not because it's a bad game or poorly made, far from it, but so many fans say this game was a disappointment. It was unbalanced, it wasn't competitive enough, it just didn't live up to Melee. To be fair, it was 7 years in the making, so expectations were definitely high. Considering Melee blew everybody away after being developed in only 2, kinda meant Brawl had a lot to live up to. I think a major problem people had with Brawl, other than the tweaks to the Smash Bros. Gameplay, is that it didn't introduce as many new things as Melee did, it more so expanded upon Melee. But we'll get to that when we get to that. First things first, this is the only other box art I have framed next to my bed. Brawl's cover is one of the best in the series. Just look at it, all the characters are looking towards you with beams of light shooting from the center. Just the overall composition of this shot is mesmerizing. This is the box art that makes you proud of being a Nintendo fan. Popping the game in. Jesus Christ, we're greeted to a relatively long loading screen. This always killed me back in the day. Blam, Brawl's intro. What can I say? This thing is great. However, a lot of people will completely dismiss this intro due to Melee's being the absolute cream of the crop, and while I'm not going to disagree entirely, I'm going to defend Brawl's right quick. So Brawl's intro is a compilation of CGI cutscenes from the game's adventure mode and random shots of gameplay. People have complained that it's not a coherent intro that was animated with the purpose of being an intro. Like Melee's. I smell a counterpoint. Melee's intro still had shots that very rarely connected to each other. Here's Metroid. Here's Zelda. Here's Yoshi. Like, it was basically random shots of these characters, and Brawl's is the same thing, except these shots were also used elsewhere in the game. Melee's intro had gameplay randomly cut in too. Both of these are far more similar than people act like they are. I will say, some parts of Brawl's intro leave me feeling like, oh man, I'm gonna look like a loser for saying this intro isn't that bad. Like, the final shot is just the halberd flying. To quote the 11th commandment, that is not how you end an opening movie for Brawl. People also dislike how the announcer doesn't screech Super Smash Bros. Brawl on the title screen. Alright, I'll give you that one, but the game already broke every bone in my ear. I'll gladly take a moment of silence. Let's talk about the roster of characters, as Brawl's is the first one in the series to omit characters from previous games. However, I'd argue it's a massive improvement over Melee, not only because of the sheer abundance of new characters, but because it feels much more refined. I think Brawl really hit home how special it is for a character to be in Smash Bros. Like with Melee, it felt like they let anybody in. Young Link? Fucking sure. Brawl trimmed the fat of Melee's character roster, with each character feeling important to the world of gaming. Dr. Mario, Roy, Young Link, and Pichu were cut alongside Mewtwo, which was odd considering he was a completely unique fighter, but I think the characters introduced in Brawl more than made up for the losses. We got Nintendo characters who were always obvious candidates for Smash Bros. Wario, Diddy Kong, Olimar, Meta Knight, and King Dedede. Old school characters reintroduced for a new generation with Rob, an accessory for the NES turned into a fighter, and Pit, who was the star of the Kid Icarus series, which also goes by the name of what? Most people who played Smash Bros. Had no clue who this guy was, definitely because he only had 2 games at the time, the last of which was on the Game Boy in 1991. Pit was different compared to the revival of, say, the Ice Climbers and Melee, because while the Ice Climbers felt like a 3D version of their 8-bit selves, Pit was designed as if he kept on getting new games and evolved over time, much like how Link did. It's really cool what they did with him, and it sparked interest in a potential new Kid Icarus game, which Sakurai later made. Zero Suit Samus was a new character playable after unleashing Samus's final smash, or simply by using a button combination on the character select screen. Toon Link was the replacement for Young Link, which I think was a smart change. He represents the Wind Waker style of Zelda games and is much more unique than Young Link ever was. Lucario was basically Brawl's replacement for Mewtwo. I'm more of a Mewtwo guy myself, but Lucario brought with him some interesting ideas. Ike was Roy's replacement, but instead of being a Marth clone, he was an entirely unique character. Lucas was the second Mother/Earthbound representative alongside Ness, staying true to Nintendo's tradition to do anything Mother 3 related outside of Japan except release the game itself. Wolf was a new Star Fox character, being similar to Fox and Falco, but pretty unique at the same time, and of course, one of the coolest newcomers, Pokemon trainer, allowing you to control either Squirtle, Ivysaur, or Charizard. Brawl had a ton of great additions to the roster, but the biggest news came with the introduction of third-party characters. This was a huge deal. Like, the first third-party Smash Bros. Character must be that came out of nowhere. Snake always felt like a serial killer in a sea of cotton candy. He's a cool character and definitely iconic enough and worthy of being called a video game all-star. But picture a world where Snake was never in Smash Bros. Would he really be that heavily requested of a character for Smash Bros? I think Mega Man, Pac-Man, Bomberman, or even Simon Belmont would have fit better as one of the first third-party characters in Smash Bros. History. But Snake definitely got people talking and made it clear that Smash Bros. Wasn't just a celebration of Nintendo characters, but video game characters as a whole. Since third-party characters could now be represented, I think that made new Smash Bros. Characters being revealed feel more impactful. Just like the inclusion of Sonic the Hedgehog was, man, the perfect third-party character to be in Smash Bros. They've made it happen. Mario's rival, one of the most iconic faces in all of gaming, his moveset blows, most of it is just a spin dash, man. Moving on to where these characters actually fight, I love Brawl's stage selection, man. So much variety, so many series represented. There's a lot of wacky, crazy stages, but there's still a fair amount of stages that are calm and competitively viable. I adore PictoChat, WarioWare, Luigi's Mansion, Delfino Plaza, Yoshi's Island, Bridge of Eldin, Skyworld. So many great ones. We have some fun ideas for stages too, like 75 meters, Mario Brothers, and Hand and Bow, but those play like gingivitis. A select few melee stages are brought back, but no stages from the first game, unfortunately. That was always a bummer. The gameplay here is still Smash Brothers, there's no doubt about that. The biggest new addition has to be Final Smashes. When the Smash Ball appears, if you happen to break it open, you can unleash your Final Smash, a character-specific special move that's tailor-made to be a devastating blow to your opponents. Most of them. Assist trophies are also here as new items, which allow for other characters to appear alongside you to help you out. A solid compromise for some of these guys not being playable. Speaking of items, lots of great new ones, specifically the Dragoon, where you have to collect all 3 pieces to unleash one of my favorite reticles of all time. Tons of control options are available. You can play with just the Wii remote on its side, and as a kid, I thought this was the most optimal way to play, just disregard me already. Overall, Brawl is still Smash Brothers, just with more additions, and oh shit, random tripping can occur, which is a bit on the heart-wrenchingly dumb side of things. On top of that, the game is much slower than Melee, which made the game much less interesting competitively, and Meta Knight's a character. I just realized I'm supposed to hate this game. I've made it clear I'm not a competitive guy by any means, but I think it's still important to make sure those guys are happy with the game, and in that regard, yeah, Brawl failed. It was obviously geared more towards the Wii's target demographic, the casuals, the newcomers. Brawl's original name was Baby's First Smash Brothers. It's supposed to be easier to pick up. Sadly, that turned countless fans off from this game, and I can understand why. However, that shouldn't be the reason for considering this a bad game. Many Smash Brothers fans still claim that the one-step plan on how to make a Super Smash Bros. Brawl is to shit. This game still has a lot to love about it, and because of the easier mechanics, we have so many more Smash Brothers fans. It has its problems, but Brawl shouldn't be completely tossed to the side due to its gameplay changes. It made it more accessible for people and created new fans. I mean, come on. That is a good thing. Random tripping is still dumb though, and I will definitely toss some other aspects of the game to the side. The art style doesn't hold up all too well. You see, with Melee, it still looks good, but character models look outdated by today's standards. Brawl fits much more in line with modern Nintendo designs, but I gotta say, the overall direction they took with this game invokes the same feeling of choking on baked beans whenever I play it. Like, it's much more realistic this time around, with much drabber colors, and it just doesn't feel like Nintendo. Things are obviously this way because Exhibit A, the Wii and GameCube were very similar power-wise, so how do you make Brawl look better? Make it look more realistic, of course. And Exhibit B, Snake. You have this green happy dinosaur and a pink puffball jumping around in the same game as an advocate for nicotine. Of course you're gonna have to make the colorful characters a bit more detailed and less colorful to work better alongside them. Don't get me wrong, the game looks fine, its attention to detail is very appealing, but I just don't feel like it's the greatest representations of these characters. Like, when I think Mario, I don't think denim! It's fine, just the art style, it's a bit too realistic and gritty, I guess, for a celebration of Nintendo. Even though the visuals may not hold up all too well, this game's soundtrack is phenomenal and will be played at my funeral in its entirety. The quality and quantity of tracks have been greatly increased, and every track deserves at the very least a foot thumping. You can unlock more music by finding CDs and can even customize how often you want certain songs to play on certain stages with My Music. Melee brought with it a slew of new single-player modes, and when we look at what Brawl did, wow, it looks like Brawl remembers Melee too, guys! I'm sad to report Classic Mode was taken to the vet and either declawed or neutered. I'm really having a tough time deciding which one. It's still the same variety of matches against random opponents, but the fun little minigame diversions are gone. All that's left are 2 rounds of break the targets. And get this, back in the first 2 games, each character had their own unique break the target stage that took advantage of that character's abilities. Now there's just 5 separate stages based on 5 different difficulty levels. Sure, that's easier to develop and makes it more simple to talk about who got the highest score and whatnot, but this is way lamer now. Other than that, Classic Mode is pretty much the same as Melee. The same goes for All-Star Mode, pretty much the same as Melee. You fight all characters in the game on 1 life with only 3 recovery hearts, except now you can play with a friend if you want to. The mission-like event matches, they're brand new scenarios, but pretty much the same song and dance as Melee, except there are a handful of co-op events now. The Stadium, again, features home run contests, basically the same as Melee, hit the sandbag as far as possible. Target Smash, go lay down. Multi-man Brawl, a bunch of opponents to fight like multi-man Melee in Melee, and boss battles in the game, which it's a nice feature to have this at whim. Yeah, I can see why some may have been a bit disappointed with Brawl in this aspect. Melee simply introduced more to the series, while Brawl basically took what Melee did and tweaked, refined, or just changed it up for better or for worse. However, the biggest addition to Brawl's single-player modes was the brand new Adventure Mode. This was a complete overhaul in the concept of the Adventure Mode for Melee, and was kinda treated as its own separate game within the game, titled the Subspace Emissary. Let's give it a try. I really fucking hope I never have to do a book report on that plot. How is there not spark notes for that thing? Yeah, so Adventure Mode has been increased from a solid 30 minutes to 8 hours. The mode just becomes a bit too repetitive and goes on for far too long. I did like it, but it just needed to be cut down a bit. It's all worth it for those sweet, sweet CGI cutscenes that tell what I think is a story. I'm not even gonna try to make sense out of it. Characters get turned into trophies, which is bad. Stop the butterfly man at the end, that's what I took from it. Subspace allowed you to pick characters in the order you preferred playing them, and whenever a secret character would join your team, they'd be unlocked outside of Adventure Mode, which definitely gave Subspace more of a purpose. However, my biggest problem with the Adventure Mode is the lack of a ton of fan service. You battle a ton of generic original enemies, traverse worlds that, even if they are from Nintendo games, just feel really bland and not interesting. For example, so many of my memories from Subspace Emissary involve Skyworld, the land of Kid Icarus, a game I primarily associate with black backgrounds. This does nothing for the Nintendo version within me. Subspace Emissary is basically the exact opposite of Adventure Mode in Melee. In that game, Adventure Mode had you exploring a good handful of worlds from Nintendo games, while also being incredibly short. Subspace Emissary is basically the length of a full game on its own, but is more original. And please take that the wrong way. It's just not interesting to explore a lot of these worlds. If they're from an actual game, they still feel super generic, and if they're completely original worlds, they feel super generic. Subspace Emissary gave Brawl a lot of its charming character, and I like that it's here, but it definitely had some problems that could definitely be fixed in the next Smash Bros. Come on! But Brawl's main selling point wasn't the Adventure Mode, it was the inclusion of online play. Well, we aren't missing much. Laggy, soggy matches were abundant, man. Online play with Brawl was simply not that great. So go back to local multiplayer, and while you're at it, fiddle around in Special Brawl. Greatly improved from Melee, Special Brawl basically allows you to create a match that'll make your parents ask, what the hell are you playing? Doubling down on Smash Bros. Being a museum of sorts, Brawl introduces some really cool little extras and my favorite sub-menu as a kid, the Vault. Here lies a ton of the collectibles and extra content, including the trophies, where we now have completely brand new ones, and more of them at that. They're still a blast to collect and now have even more detail both in terms of the trophies themselves and the descriptions. Now 2 games are listed for character appearances when applicable, and the console the game was on is represented too. You can never say Brawl isn't worth the money. You can arrange them in any way you want, twist and turn them all around, it's a power trip. Of course, if you want more trophies, you're gonna have to try your hand at the mode that separated the men from the boys, Coin Launcher, where you use the coins earned throughout the game as bullets to nab trophies and stickers, while also trying to get rid of all this trash. Nothing will ever be as stressful as seeing a trophy you need appear at the very top, but these metallic spheres decide to be metallic spheres, and God! And then to waste so many coins on a trophy that you ended up already having, nothing makes me want to trudge back to the Wii menu more than that. I always found it so cool that Brawl had a decent amount of content that wasn't fighting based. Speaking of which, stickers! Wait for Sakurai to say, what are you all bitching about? Crystal's already in Smash Brothers. Basically, stickers were random pieces of art you could collect from tons of different games. Back in the day, I didn't even know the stickers were here for you to stick onto your character in the Subspace Emissary for stat boosts. I just thought they were fucking stickers. You can make little collages and stuff. It was a lot of fun for me. Now, if you want to talk modes that'll make your local 11-year-old Scott Wozniak squee, look no further than Stage Builder. You can now build your own Smash Brothers stages. That's amazing. I did this. The Stage Builder is very limited, and while that can lead to some out-of-the-box thinking and thus some cool ideas, the novelty of making your own Smash Brothers stages wears thin pretty quickly here. The themes, items, and terrain you can choose from are all just super generic, which doesn't make much sense when you can choose any background music from the game to play on your stage. Why can't I play Kirby music on this stage that has no Kirby-themed elements on it? It would have been cool to have some Mario, Zelda, Metroid, or whatever franchise type items or enemies to plop onto the stages. The Stage Builder was never really seriously used by me. I generally only fiddled around in here just to see how much of a jackass I could be. Challenges features a huge wall of things to do and trinkets to unlock. Chronicle is a list of all Nintendo published titles, which I always really appreciated. And finally, Masterpieces allows you to see where a few select fighters got their start. Yep, you can play retro games within Smash Brothers. This is insane. Time to twiddle in a game of Donkey Kong. Yeah, Nintendo still had to be able to sell all these games separately on the Wii Shop channel, so we can play these games, albeit under time limits. And in most of these games' cases, strict time limits. I wouldn't mind being able to play Super Mario Brothers for only a minute if it didn't take about a minute to load the demo. Also, the variety is a little lacking here, not a ton of overall games, and most of them are Mario titles. It's whatever though, the idea behind Masterpieces is great and was one of the coolest extras in Brawl to me as a kid. When I unlocked Super Mario World, I was giddy, man, but I realized the only controller I had that would work with it was a GameCube controller. And you truly haven't seen hell until you've tried playing Super Mario World with a GameCube controller. It just doesn't work! And that is basically Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and listen, I will always love Melee for what it introduced to Smash Bros. And for being an excellent game all around. But Brawl just took it to another level for me. I know of the problems with the gameplay tweaks and not as many new ideas and modes as Melee, but to me, Brawl was Melee but with even more stuff and fan service. It's always a joy to pop it in and to just explore. I definitely hold a lot of sentimental value with this game as it was the first Smash Bros. That really hooked me. So keep that in mind when I say I prefer it to Melee. It's far from perfect, but I think at the very least we can all agree it's an extremely well-made game that had a lot of love and attention put into it. And hey, if you just can't stand the gameplay, you can always turn to fan-made mods like Project M. It may not be your Smash Brothers of choice, and that's okay, but it'll always be one of my favorites. Brawl was a great game, and was where everybody's mind started racing as to what could possibly be a Smash Brothers character. Rayman, Geno, the General, Chibi Robo, Vince Young, Brett Favre? As an assist trophy. Hey y'all, Scott here. Listen, I've noticed newborn baby name books are the hot thing right now, so I've decided to work on a newborn baby last name book. Completely untapped market, never have seen one before. We have all the perfect names to spank onto your child. We have Smith, Johnson, Williams for Nintendo 3DS, Brown. Super Smash Brothers for Nintendo 3DS and Wii U for the Nintendo 3DS and Wii U. The fourth entry in the best series featuring Nintendo and video game all-stars assaulting each other holds a few milestones. The first Smash Brothers game in HD, the first one on a handheld, the first one to actually be 2 games. Smash 4 was an incredibly ambitious title I played to death. And while it has the gameplay, the characters, the pizzazz we love Smash Brothers for, it always felt like it was missing some of the magic of previous entries. Listen, I love Smash 4. I've easily played it the most out of all the games and adore so much about it, but it just misses the mark with a bunch of little things. I'll try to explain myself, but beforehand, might as well go on and on and on about the development and lead up to release. So New Smash Bros. Was announced at E3 2011 for the 3DS and Wii U with some form of connectivity between each other. No footage, no name, no other details. Masahiro Sakurai was taking the helm once again as director for the project. However, at the time of its announcement, he was still working on Kid Icarus Uprising for the 3DS. Satoru Iwata announced the new Smash Bros. Game crazy early in development, as in, before it was even crazy early in development. It was obviously done just to plop consumer faith in the Wii U and 3DS, saying, don't worry guys, there'll be a new Smash Bros. A year later at E3 2012, Wii Fit U was announced, but Smash Bros. Was nowhere in sight. Behind the scenes, however, the project was just starting out. Sakurai officially proposed his vision for the next Smash Bros. To Nintendo in April of 2012, with features like custom moves, Smash Run, 8-player Smash, and a few new characters being detailed. A few weeks after E3, a Nintendo Direct was broadcast unveiling that Bandai Namco was developing the next Smash Bros. I think some people were a bit uneasy about this reveal, like these are the guys who made Pac-Man Party, we're gonna trust them with our Smash Brothers? But in my opinion, Bandai Namco was always an excellent choice. Previous Smash Bros. Development teams weren't nearly as experienced in creating modern fighting games or nearly as big as Bandai Namco. Using a company as large as them would mean the game would have more manpower behind it and thus release a bit quicker. And Sakurai was still manning the project, not much to be worried about there. Some light news came out over the next year, like this whiteboard drawing Sakurai showed off and the announcement that the first screens of the game would be unveiled at E3 2013, and that led to the worst day of my 16-year-old life. Not the unveil itself, no, Nintendo announced that they wouldn't have a standard press conference at E3 2013, rather they would live stream a pre-recorded Nintendo Direct. A common practice for them these days, yes, but back then people were not happy about this decision, and the livestream itself definitely didn't help things. There were some technical issues, the stream wasn't very smooth at all, it would freeze a ton. Wasn't that great to watch. I'm sure many people didn't have a problem with it, but that wasn't the same for me and various others. It was so bad Iwata publicly apologized for the problems. Now, in terms of the actual full unveil of the new Smash Brothers, oh yeah! We have one final announcement. They gave me those two sweet Switches, the Flaming Smash logo, the fake out Animal Crossing chunk. Oh my god, it's a new Smash Brothers! The 3DS version was the first unveiled, showcasing characters with a thick outline to be more visible on the smaller screen. It still looked really good for the system though. But who the hell cares? Mario sheds his skin and goes full on HD in the Wii U version! Villager from Animal Crossing was the only newcomer unveiled, and the temporary titles of Smash Brothers for 3DS and Wii U were shown with a release date of 2014. Was good. Before the E3 show floor opened, Wii Fit Trainer was revealed alongside a quick demo shown to attendees, and that was it for the Smash Brothers presence at E3 2013. Not a bad way to start things off. Now that summer was a roller coaster of emotions. We went from an absolutely phenomenal reveal trailer to... Woo! It can't get much worse than that! For the next year and a half after the unveil, Sakurai would post an image on Miiverse from either the Wii U or 3DS version roughly every weekday. Every so often, a veteran fighter, new stage, item, assist trophy, or other things would be revealed, but many times it was just Sakurai posting a picture saying, look at this. It was still exciting to wake up and see what the update of the day was, but plenty will argue that the way Brawl handled the lead up to release was far better. They would unveil a new piece of information every day, no matter how mundane. With Smash Wii U and 3DS, it was completely up in the air if the pick of the day would be something new. But hey, at least it's better than Smash Ultimate's Smash blog. 90% of the info revealed each week was something we already knew, and that's being generous. About half a year after the E3 showing, finally a new character was shown during a December 2013 Nintendo Direct, Rosalina and Luma, and afterwards, new character reveals and info in general came out at a pretty frequent pace. Little Mac was revealed in a February 2014 Direct, and that was my most wanted newcomer right there, so I was pretty satisfied. A Smash Bros. Focus Direct was shown in April of 2014, revealing that the 3DS version would come out in the summer, while the Wii U version would release later that winter. That surprised a lot of people at the time that the 3DS version would come out first, but in retrospect, that definitely made the most sense. The April Direct was pretty good, albeit with nothing absolutely mind-blowing, ending things off with a reveal of Greninja, which got me saying, Mewtwo's back, who the hell is this? A Smash Bros. Invitational tournament for the Wii U game was announced for E3 2014, which was huge. Just the fact that Nintendo was not only starting to support the Smash Bros. Community, but flaunting them as well were two large footsteps in the right direction, especially after the controversy of them initially pulling Melee out of EVO 2013 for some reason. Not only that, but it was announced that Smash Bros. Wii U would support GameCube controllers via an adapter. That was the most excited I've ever been about a controller in years. E3 2014 rolls around with Mii's finally making their way in as playable characters. I would have been way more into this if it happened in Brawl, but I was perfectly fine with their inclusion. The 3DS version's release date was revealed to be That's Not Summer 2014, amiibo figures for the game are shown off allowing you to train up a fighter, and a trailer for Palutena finished the event off. That always felt like an odd character to end the E3 stream on, but regardless, it was still a great trailer. Pac-Man was later introduced at a developer roundtable, and I can't believe how many people thought he wasn't gonna make it in the game somehow. Namco was making the game, and why would they put in somebody like Heihachi from Tekken instead of Pac-Man? He's Pac-Man. I was pretty stoked to see him in here. I always loved Pac-Man, and being one of the most iconic characters in all of video games, I thought he was always a no-brainer for Smash Bros. Later in July, a livestream was held to simply reveal a newcomer trailer. This ended up being for Robin and Lucina from Fire Emblem Awakening. effectively shutting down loads of rumors since many predicted Chrom would be the new Fire Emblem rep this time around. But that didn't stop a totally real leak from the ESRB revealing the remainder of the characters, plus loads of other screenshots and videos of the game. Yep, it kinda blew that all the secret characters were revealed 2 months before the game's release, but the thing is, the 3DS version was releasing in Japan a month before everywhere else. Either way, we would have had the characters spoiled for us over here, so leak or no leak, I don't think things would have been that different. The last newcomer to be unveiled pre-launch was Shulk during an August Japanese-only Nintendo Direct. Afterwards, Nintendo kept cramming Smash 3DS down everybody's throats with trailers and commercials everywhere, plus a demo that was exclusive to select Club Nintendo members until being available to everybody a week or so later. I was one of the lucky few to get the demo early, and let me tell you, that was tombstone worthy. While Smash Bros. For 3DS released on October 3rd, 2014 here in North America, Smash Bros. For Wii U still had a lot of mystery surrounding it at the time. We didn't know a ton about the exclusive features in that version until the Smash Wii U 50 Fact Extravaganza later in October, detailing what set the Wii U version apart from the 3DS one, ending things off with the reveal of Mewtwo coming back as DLC. And finally, the Wii U version, alongside the GameCube controllers, adapters, and the first wave of Amiibo figures, launched on November 21st, 2014. Yep, that was the build-up to Smash 4's release, and it was definitely a fun ride. Smash Ultimate is great and all, but they revealed all the characters returning in one fell swoop. That made for an amazing unveil, but the fact that Smash 4 drip-fed us veteran and newcomer characters over a year and a half made things more interesting speculation and news-wise in my opinion. While Brawl was the first Smash Bros. Game I owned, Smash 4 was the first one I played when I knew what the hell a Virtual Boy was. I was far more competent at actually understanding Nintendo history and how to play Smash Bros. Effectively, thus I picked both versions up when they launched and played both of them for hundreds of hours each. I loved and still love these games, but I do have some nitpicks and actual problems with both of them that I'm more than happy to whine about. Now, whenever people talk about Smash 4, they always focus on the Wii U version, but let's be fair here. Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS and Super Smash Bros. For Wii U are separate games. / the same game. The more I think about Smash 4, the harder it is to classify what the hell it is. They both have the exact same character lineup, the same movesets, the same general art style, but they both have a different lineup of stages, modes, trophies, and while the gameplay is basically one-to-one the same across both versions, it's different in a few ways, such as assist trophy characters and Pokeball Pokemon running at a lower frame rate on the 3DS, and the Wii U version giving characters the ability to swim. It's basically different versions of the same overall game. You've played all the characters on Smash 3DS, you've played all the characters on Smash Wii U. Also, let's congratulate the winners of the Most Effective Title Award for 2014. These things are no nonsense, they get right to the point. Nothing interesting, no subtitle that's a synonym for fight like with the previous two games, just blatantly telling you what the game is. This is really boring. To be fair, with these two games simply being different versions of the same game, you couldn't really give them both unique subtitles, but at the same time, you couldn't call them the same thing because they're both different games. You see why it's hard to classify what these things are? Like calling Smash 3DS Super Smash Bros. Dimensions and Smash Wii U Super Smash Bros. Universe would be far more interesting, but it makes it seem like these two are separate games. When they really aren't, but calling both of them something like Super Smash Bros. Smackdown would imply these are the exact same games, when they really aren't. Yeah, the titles blow, but there's not really much else they could have called them. When the 3DS version came out, I was giddy, let me tell you. It was beyond satisfying to finally get a Smash Bros. Game on a handheld. I dreamed about being able to play Brawl on my DS back in the day, and to finally get basically that was great. Thankfully, the handheld form factor did little to impact the gameplay. This is Smash Bros., regardless of playing it on a console or on the go. The gameplay is faster than Brawl, yet slower than Melee, and it just felt like the perfect balance between the two. It's fast enough to remain interesting for competitive players, yet not too fast to be somewhat alienating to more casual ones. There were a few mechanics that have made their way in here, plus a few that have left. Random tripping from Brawl got the boot, while the way grabbing onto a ledge worked has been massively tweaked. But in the end, this feels how Smash Bros. Should feel to me, and while it's most comparable to Brawl, it's just so much better than that. At the time of its release, this was my favorite Smash Bros. In terms of core fighting. While many will say the Wii U version plays best due to being able to use an actual controller on a screen bigger than a sticky note, I have to give them credit that Smash Bros. Works really well on the 3DS. Even when the 3DS doesn't work really well for Smash Bros. Bless the Circle Pad's heart, but it just wasn't made to withstand Smash. In the end though, both versions play great, and while the 3DS version is obviously technically inferior to its Wii U counterpart, I think it's far better than people give it credit for. Like I said, the character roster across both versions is the exact same, and it's just, oh, it's so good. The newcomers are all so damn unique, and it actually makes the old characters feel kinda dated in comparison. Little Mac is a blast to use for fun. Villager has so many interesting moves, and how did it take this long to get Duck Hunt in here? And the third-party roundup, it's absolutely perfect. Sonic, Mega Man, and Pac-Man are the definitive 3 third-party characters who need to be in Smash Bros. In my opinion. And hey, Pac-Man is my undisputed main here. I love this character. You see, you have to just hit people with the fire hydrant and then give them the old Pac-Man special. Ah, the fire hydrant. You couldn't design a moveset for Pac-Man without the fire hydrant. However, some tweaks to the roster had to be made to get everything running smoothly on the 3DS. And even if things would work perfectly fine on the Wii U, both versions had to have identical rosters, so characters who would transform mid-match, like Samus and Zelda, were altered, and their transformations Zero Suit Samus and Sheik were turned into their own separate characters. That's not a big deal at all, but the character of Pokemon Trainer was cut entirely, and only Charizard alone remained in the game. Squirtle and Ivysaur were cut, alongside the Ice Climbers, who just weren't working right on the 3DS. In addition to those 3, Wolf, Lucas, and Snake were given the boot as well. But for some reason, they decided to bring Dr. Mario from Melee back, and man, who wants Wolf when we have Dark Pit? As amazing as this roster is, it sure does have a strong case of the why the f***s. Now, I'd argue that the characters cut from Brawl to Smash 4 weren't major necessities in the roster, but it was still sad to see them go, even though some eventually came back as DLC. Pokemon Trainer is far more interesting than just Charizard alone, and Ice Climbers were kind of a Smash Bros. Staple at this point. It hurt even more to see them bring back an old Melee veteran to then totally ignore another one, Mewtwo, of course before DLC was announced. 3 clone characters are here, Lucina, Dark Pit, and Dr. Mario, and these were thrown in as bonuses. They barely took much time to develop, so these characters weren't chosen over bringing back Snake or Lucas, for example. You can easily tell these characters are in a league of their own simply by looking at the character select screen. Yeah, we gotta talk about these menus. Tons of people dog on Smash for Wii U's menu, and while I agree to an extent that it doesn't make all too much sense, Smash for 3DS's menu doesn't make all too much sense, and it looks hideous. This is a main menu with a question mark at the end of it. Nothing looks in place here. Like, the Smash icon just looks kind of awkward sitting there, and why is the challenges button the only one with a crazy thin outline? And of course, the infamous menu name, Games and More. You know, when you think about it, every single one of these menu options could fit under that title. That's the problem. I will defend the Wii U menu in one aspect, and that's looks. This thing is gorgeous. The colors, the characters flashing by in the background, the boldness of every icon, it all looks phenomenal. But it does not excuse this character select screen. Again, at least it looks pretty. Regardless of if you've unlocked all the characters or not, or have DLC fighters, it just feels uneven and unorganized. The final update for the game split Pac-Man from the rest of the third-party characters. That bugs me. Why are these 3 clones in their own section? Like, 2 are brand new and 1 is a veteran. At the very least, why isn't Dr. Mario with the Mario characters? Every other clone character is with their series, except for these guys. And speaking of Mario characters, why is Yoshi separating them? He's classified under his own series, and the DLC characters aren't with their respective series, they're all just down here. Let's talk about stages. The stage list differs between the 3DS and Wii U games, with the 3DS having a smaller stage count with a heavy focus on handheld representation, and the Wii U focusing more so on console games for its stages. The 3DS has some great ones like 3D Land, Rainbow Road, Paper Mario, Spirit Train, Mute City, Picto-Chat 2, Pac-Maze, with some returning favorites, Yoshi's Island and WarioWare just to name 2. There are a fair amount of returning stages to make up for franchises without a new stage in this version, but with the 3DS's low resolution and lesser graphical quality, the stages don't feel too out of place. Now this, on the other hand, I don't know if this is a controversial opinion or not, but I do not like the stage selection in Smash Wii U. It's just so boring to me. Like, there is not a single stage that I'm like, oh yeah, I love this one. I like Pilot Wings and Woolly World. That's about it, to be honest. Tons of stages have cool ideas like Gamer and Jungle Hijinks, but they're just not that interesting to play on for me. This list just screams padding. Melee and Brawl made sure to label stages that were brought back from previous titles. Sure, that kind of undervalued the older stages, but they held this sense of pride that their new stages were more than enough to satisfy players. Smash for Wii U includes them in here alongside the new ones, which would be fine if they didn't look like they were centuries old. That's one of my biggest problems with this game. The returning stages just weren't updated graphically enough. 90% of them look outdated and really bland. And because old stages are just thrown in with the new ones on the stage select, they feel even more out of place. Like, look at this. This doesn't look like it should have been released in 2014. And even some of the quote-unquote new stages just feel like filler. Town and City is basically just Smashville, and both are included here. Flat Zone X is considered a new stage, but don't lie, it's just Flat Zone 2 with some elements from the original Flat Zone. A new Mario Circuit stage alongside the old Mario Circuit stage. Why? Battlefield and Big Battlefield. 5 minutes are shaved off of my life whenever I mention that. I personally prefer the 3DS lineup. It has a better roster of returning stages in my opinion, and the new ones are more interesting. At least some of the stages are shared between the versions. I quite like the boxing ring, and Wily Castle would have been great if it weren't for the leading cause of the phrase, "oh for f***'s sake." Yeah, there's a decent amount of stage bosses or hazards in both of these game stages, and a few totally ruin perfectly good stages. Just intrusive and take away so much from a match, it's ridiculous. Some bosses are on fairly large stages and either can be avoided, like Metal Face, or they actually add some fun to the match, like with Ridley. These guys are totally manageable. But other times, bosses are the Yellow Devil and the Flying Man. At least there's now Final Destination forms of each stage, which allows you to retain the aesthetic with a completely hazardless flat stage. I really do like this inclusion because you still get the ambiance of Magicant without this mistake. In terms of items you can use, they had some fun new additions, albeit very overpowered ones. The Gus Bellows, Zora Club, Beetle, and the Special Flag can be kinda cheap at times. Items are still definitely fun in the game, but can feel a tad much at times. Plus, there's just so many of them too. Smash for 3DS and Wii U allow you to customize your characters, choosing from variations on your special moves and using equipment to alter your stats. This is a really neat addition. The problem is you have to unlock all the special moves per character. You just get them randomly for playing the game in its various modes, so not only do you get them randomly, the moves you get are random and you can get moves you already have. Ladies and gentlemen, that effectively changes my stance on custom moves from that's pretty cool to who gives a piss. Now you can connect the two versions to transfer your custom characters. That's it. That's fundamentally all you get from connecting the two games. That's a lie. You can use the 3DS as a controller on the Wii U game, which is a feature that's basically just worth a out of 10. They really built up the connectivity between the two versions, saying we'll unveil what it does later, but this is all it is. It feels like they wanted to do cooler things like transfer stages and trophies between the two games, because this just feels super basic and not at all interesting to be honest. Now there's one more major thing the Wii U version has in regards to multiplayer matches. 8-player Smash. It's only available on select stages, but over the course of the game's life, many more stages were tweaked to be 8-player Smash compatible. Yep, this is a mess. It's pretty insane that you can play Smash Brothers with 8 people, but this is a bit much for me. It's insanely difficult to keep track of your character most of the time, and it just feels too cluttered. Impressive feature that has its moments, but I'd rather stick to 4 players or less. Visually, Smash 4 looks fantastic both on the 3DS and Wii U, but of course Wii U gets the edge. Each character and stage feels completely faithful to their original game, and the colors are going crazy here! Take that, Super Smash Bros. Brawl! Sound-wise, I mean, it's Smash Brothers, of course it's amazing, moving on. Alright, but now it's time to actually talk about the modes outside of the regular multiplayer matches. There's online, and personally I've been pretty lucky and have had little issues with it. It ain't perfect, but it's definitely serviceable and works fine enough most of the time. The mode is separated via 2 sections, for fun and for glory, as in, the mode is separated via 1 section, for glory. I never really played for fun online simply because it's 4-player battles on any stage with all items. Now I have nothing against that, but online, that just leads to a cornucopia of lag. One-on-one battles in For Glory work the best simply because it's one-on-one with no items on only Final Destination versions of stages. You're much more likely to stumble across a smooth connection here. Moving on to the big exclusive modes for each version, on Smash 3DS we have Smash Run. This is such a fun mode with a few glaring flaws. It's heavily based on City Trial mode from Kirby Air Ride and has you exploring this hefty map alongside 3 other players, grabbing equipment to level up your fighter for one final battle. That battle is completely random. It could be a race, standard battle, a jumping contest, anything. The problem is you can't interact with the other players on the map, there's no online multiplayer, you can't customize things such as the time limit or final battle conditions or anything. If Smash Run was just a bit more expanded upon, it could have been an outstanding mode. But as it is, it's a fun distraction every now and then, and nothing more really. Now the Wii U doesn't have Smash Run, instead it has Gonorrhea. Yes, Smash Tour. It's a board game in the vein of Mario Party. You roll some dice and have the same equipment from Smash Run to power yourself up, and try to collect as many fighters and trophies as you can. You can equip the trophies in battle, and they do all sorts of different things, like inflict damage onto an opponent at the start, give you an item, that kind of stuff. You go into battle when bumping into another player, and you use one of the fighters you've collected. You'll lose the fighter if you lose the match, and steal one if you win. At the end of the game, you have a battle with your remaining fighters all acting as separate stock. People don't like this mode. I don't think Smash Bros. Is that bad, but I don't think it's that great either. I feel like if it was simplified, a little less random, and had more character injected into it, then more people would like it. It's just so uninteresting visually. It has that generic Smash twang. You know what I'm talking about. Those elements of Smash Bros. Where the designers have to make something original and not base it off of an existing property, so they just go for desolate wasteland with torn flags. Anyway, Smash Bros. Is still better than Mario Party 10, so at least it has that going for it. And hey guys, Snake may have been cut, but at least we got Street Smash. This is one of the few 3DS exclusive modes, and I gotta be honest, I never got this one. Heading into games and more, the 3DS version is looking pretty sparse in terms of single player content. Classic mode now features this map with various choices you can make on how you progress. It's pretty simple and gets right to the point, but I like it. It's perfect for handheld play and still retains a lot of the charm of classic mode. What the hell is this? Classic mode on the Wii U version is so bad. It's just a bunch of random matches, most of which are 8-player Smash battles. What's going on here? What kills classic mode on Wii U for me is just the randomness of it all. You're not battling characters from a specific series on their home stage. You're battling a bunch of random fighters on a random stage, and then a bunch of random fighters with custom moves on a random stage. Look at this, it's a 4 versus 4 match and all my teammates die within 10 seconds. I will say, I do very much like the difficulty selection on both versions, where you have to wager more gold to go on the higher difficulties for a chance of a higher reward. And if you actually get to the end of the game on a high enough difficulty, you get to battle Master and Crazy Hand before these new forms appear, all due to this Master Core. These forms are pretty tricky, but I really learned them inside and out and beat the game on 9.0 a few times. Both versions have these forms, but the Wii U version has an exclusive final form where you have to traverse the Master Fortress. Overall, Classic Mode on 3DS is a pretty good time. I hate Classic Mode on Wii U, but both end things off with great boss battles. I really like what they did here. All-Star Mode is back, but even on Hard Mode, it's just a bunch of nothing. Like, it's so easy to defeat everybody. All I do in this mode is just up smash constantly, and I end up winning. Stadium is back with the tried and true favorites, Home Run Contest and Multi-Man Smash, but Break the Targets turned into Dun Dun Dun. I'm gonna defend this mode real quick. Yeah, I would have preferred it being more like the original Break the Targets from 64 and Melee, where every character had their own unique stage, but this is way better than Brawl's 5 target smash stages across all characters. It's just so much more interesting to go for a high score compared to Brawl's mode, I'll always say that. So many modes are basically the same across both versions, but the Wii U has some exclusive twists. Like in Target Blast, there's 3 different stages, and the bomb is bigger in round 2. I need a Wii U! Events are back, still great and exclusive to the Wii U version, this time with a grid map sort of thing, because, I don't know. Special Orders, also exclusive to the Wii U, and it's pretty cool. It's basically about taking orders from Master and Crazy Hand, all about winning fights under special conditions. The difference between Master and Crazy Orders is Master Orders just has you beat one of these things and you're done. You win your prize and you can pick another. Crazy Orders is about seeing how many orders you can win in a row until you think you've had enough and finish things off with a battle against Crazy Hand. Crazy Orders is really the portion of this mode I played the most. Master Orders wasn't nearly as engrossing to me. But you know what's totally engrossing? Minus the N, minus the ing? Stage Builder! This feature in Brawl wasn't great, but it got the job done. Stage Builder is exclusive to Wii U and thus used the gamepad to draw stages, which in concept, that sounds amazing! But in reality, drawing stages doesn't add nearly as many possibilities as you think it would. It's very restrictive overall, and the amount of items you can put on your stage... Oh no. This is it. This is all you can do. I know they limited the options since you can draw whatever you want, but in the end, Stage Builder feels completely barren and was better in Brawl simply for being able to use so many more items. The vault is where the trophies lie, and you can get them randomly through playing the various other modes, but you can just buy some in the trophy shop, which is adorable. Look, there's all this Nintendo merchandise in the background. This was such a fun idea. You can also play Trophy Rush, and this is such a great mode. You can just constantly break stuff until you fill this meter up, and you're just showered with trophies and custom moves. Just make sure not to fall off or let the junk over junk itself. Onto the trophies themselves, and... I don't know, I collected almost every trophy in Smash Wii U, and while trophy collecting is part of the reason I continually play Smash Bros. By myself, I felt like I was more so collecting the trophies to collect them all, not because I wanted to see them all. While there are loads of really cool looking ones, There's a lot of flat trophies and alternate color character trophies that just aren't nearly as interesting to me. Like the stages, the 3DS version has less trophies, but they focus on handheld games, with Wii U having more of a console focus. The concept of the handheld and console versions focusing on each medium's history is fun, but it ends up making both versions feel kind of incomplete historically due to the lack of a lot of handheld representation on the console and vice versa. At least various trophies are categorized by trophy boxes. These have absolutely no purpose, but I like it. Don't take any of the criticism the wrong way, I still love trophies. Masterpieces are back from Brawl on the Wii U version, this time with super fast loading times. N64 games aren't included, but at least we have original Game Boy games, even though you couldn't play these on the Wii U anywhere else. Huh. You can also train your own amiibo to fight like you and power them up to level 50, please send help. This was initially exclusive to the Wii U version before being added to the 3DS via an update. I always liked the Smash series of amiibo because they were trophies, just like in the game. I like that. I'm not a figurine person really, so it was a bit odd that I got sucked into the amiibo craze. Only really for the Smash Brothers line though. Remember how hard it was to find certain Smash amiibo? And on top of that, remember how difficult it was to nab the GameCube controller adapter? The re-released GameCube controllers were easy peasy to find though, and I love that they released these. They work on the original GameCube as well, and it was just so nice to have new first-party GameCube controllers again. We only got the black one over here, but I ended up importing the white one from Japan. If you couldn't get the adapter, thankfully Smash Wii U offered compatibility with the most controllers of any Smash game, allowing you to play with no. Some third parties stepped up and released classic controllers for the Wii remote that felt like the GameCube controller. These weren't the greatest, but they were tolerable. I really hated how the GameCube adapter only worked for Smash Brothers, so these third-party options made it so then you can use GameCube-like controllers on various different games on the Wii U. Well, that is basically all the extra content in Smash for 3DS and Wii U, and overall, the lack of an adventure mode really hurts the single-player side of things. Sakurai stated it was due to people uploading Brawl's cutscenes online. They served as a reward for getting through the Subspace Emissary, so being able to watch them all without playing kinda defeated the purpose of the mode in his eyes. Honestly, that was never one of Sakurai's best decisions, but at least with no adventure mode, they were able to focus more so on the core gameplay and put their CGI efforts into all the amazing trailers we got for the game. Sure, adventure modes in Smash games were always flawed, and Melee's had a ton of that classic Nintendo charm, but was full of just standard fights on standard stages, and it was crazy short. Brawl's was an actual adventure mode, but lacked a lot of the Nintendo charm and was just too long. But I still like them, and its exclusion helps add to one of Smash 4's main problems in my eyes: a lack of personality. I'm not talking about like the characters themselves. If anything, the personality on them was cranked to the max. No, I'm talking the game itself. It just feels like versus battles and nothing else. And hey, you know what? It does that one thing exponentially well. Smash 4 focuses on the core fighting and the multiplayer fun that can derive from it, and that means the gameplay, in my opinion, was the best in the series at the time of its release. It's just everything else, the modes outside of multiplayer, don't feel nearly as fleshed out, or simply they're just dumbed down compared to previous games. Another problem is I like the 3DS stages more, I like the 3DS modes more, but the Wii U is how I want to play this game. I want to play it on a big TV with a controller. It's just I don't like the content in this version as much as the 3DS. I'll say this, Smash 3DS is just straight up more interesting. It has better ideas. But it doesn't matter because Smash Wii U is how everybody prefers to play. But we have to talk about Smash 4's most egregious crime: its opening movie. Now Smash 3DS doesn't even have one, it just has this police lineup on the bottom screen. Smash Wii U does indeed have an opening, and it just doesn't work well. The main theme is great, and I'm perfectly fine with them using the CGI from the reveal trailers mixed with gameplay, but man, these edits just don't make any sense. Why out of all characters is Shulk the first one we see? Why is this specific shot in general the first one we see? Why would they use scenes from reveal trailers with different art styles? It just feels like they threw together a bunch of random clips most of the time. And oh yeah, DLC came out for this game. It was alright. I think you all know that I'm more of a fan of the colorful, wacky side of Nintendo, not all this Fire Emblem trash. Get out of here. No, really, the DLC was alright. Mewtwo, Lucas, and Roy all came alongside newcomers Ryu, Cloud, Corrin, and Bayonetta. It's definitely a milestone to see Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, the game famous for not being on a Nintendo platform, in Smash Brothers, and Bayonetta was a pretty fitting end to the Smash 4 roster. She also fucking broke the game with how overpowered she was. The stages added were pretty great. Super Mario Maker was a solid choice, and the Mii Fighter costumes were 75 cents a piece, totally not worth it because I never used them, but I bought them all anyways. I wonder what the 3DS character select screen looks like now with all the DLC characters. Holy shit. Who needs Vision anyways?